Welcome back. So I'm always looking for something new to do on the channel, and today's video is a brand new subject for me: greatest rock drum intros of all time. Just to let you know what my ground rules were, first of all, I didn't want any one drummer to be represented more than once. I mean, a guy like John Bonham, for example, could easily have filled out a good portion of this top 10, but I made sure to pick only one. Second, the intro has to be drums only. You know, looking around online at greatest drum intros, I see a lot of people mentioning things like Neil Peart's Tom Sawyer. Well, if you think back to it, the first thing we hear along with Neil is that bow, that big synth E note droning. So for me, that disqualifies. I want to hear only drums. As I generally do with this type of video, these are presented alphabetically by song title. And finally, the usual stuff. If you've been enjoying the channel, please like and subscribe. Consider a financial contribution. Look in the description of the video for the options there. Buy me a coffee, PayPal, etc. Okay, let's get going. This is one that I don't think gets talked about nearly enough in lists such as these. Ballroom Blitz by The Sweet, or just Sweet if you prefer. Maybe it's because The Sweet is not nearly as well known today, although there was a period in the mid-70s where they were a really big deal. Sweet's drummer is Mick Tucker. His intro here builds so much excitement. It uses what's sometimes called a train beat, featuring single stroke 16th note rolls on the snare, primarily whole notes on the kick drum. This one also makes great use of syncopation, which is essentially where the upbeats are accented, right? 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and. That really heightens the effect. You combine that with lead vocalist Brian Connolly's bit where he sort of name checks the band, and you've got some glam rock gold on your hands. Some might say Paul Simon isn't really rock, whatever. I don't want to quibble over that right now. All I know is this is one of the coolest and most interesting drum intros in all of, let's say, pop music. This one was played by Steve Gadd, who has created many memorable drum parts for various artists over the years. If you want another example, go back and listen to Steely Dan's Asia. His performance on that one is just incredible. This is a 2-bar groove, which Gadd says came about from playing bebop music. Apparently that inspired him to play his hi-hat with his left hand and to play it in more unusual places. The drums sound great here. That's an important part of any of these drum intros. The snare has a very dry and tight sound, very 1970s. I love that extra little floor tom hit he does on every other measure. I find myself anticipating it. It's so cool. I also love the contrast between this very quirky rhythm he plays during the intro/verses and the more pedestrian beat in the chorus. It's very effective. Okay, so I had to get at least one cowbell classic on here, right? By the way, that iconic cowbell intro was not played by Stones drummer Charlie Watts. It was played by famed producer Jimmy Miller. And honestly, I think it's the interplay between those two rhythms, the cowbell and Charlie's drumming, that makes this thing such a groove. Believe it or not, Charlie later said that the way he came in on this track was a mistake. And you know what? Part of the genius of rock and roll is knowing when to leave that stuff in. And thank God they left it in because it sounds so wonderfully, beautifully sloppy. Charlie plays a little pickup. He hits his snare drum on the and of 3. And then on the and of 4, he does what we call a flam, which is where it's actually 2 hits very close together, which creates a real fat sound. So he hits the snare drum first and then the tom. So it's sort of bop, ba-dum, boom, right? If you listen closely, you can maybe hear it. And another interesting feature on this one is the distinct lack of cymbals throughout. Charlie hits that one crash right when he comes in and one right at the end, and that's just about it. But I love it. Sounds great. Wow, so this one honestly has always kind of blown my mind. I swear it sounds like about 5 drummers playing at the same time, but it's not. It's Alex Van Halen, and he did do some overdubs. It's an interesting mix of electronic and acoustic drums. The kick drum and toms are electronic, and the snare and cymbals are acoustic, kind of a cool sound. And so it can't be duplicated exactly by one person live, but you can get pretty close. Alex used to do it live, and you can go on YouTube right now and see tutorials on this where drummers can make it sound pretty darn close. All kinds of legends have sprung up around this intro. I remember being a huge Van Halen fan back in 1984 when this came out, and people were saying, oh, those aren't drums, that's Eddie Van Halen's Lamborghini idling. And it turns out that's part true. Apparently, the first thing we hear is the Lamborghini. And then after about 5 seconds, the drums come in. Engineer Don Landy matched the Lamborghini exhaust to the drums. I've heard this part described as polyrhythmic intensity. Alex just keeps piling one part on top of another. It starts off with floor toms. Then the kick drum comes in, double bass. Then we get more toms on top of that with some great displaced accents on those toms. And then Al comes in with that classic Van Halen shuffle, the driving ride cymbal, and the heavy accents on the snare 2 and 4. This is undoubtedly the shortest of the drum intros I'm going to cover today, but it's right up there with the best of them anyway. It's just a few brief seconds of unadulterated 16th note triplet fury. Now, one thing I have to address right away is who played this part. The drums on Ozzy's Diary of a Madman album were played by Lee Kerslake, who had also played on Ozzy's first solo album. The bass was played by Bob Daisley. But lo and behold, when Diary of a Madman came out, the picture on the dust jacket showed Rudy Sarzo as the bassist and Tommy Aldridge as the drummer. So understandably, many rock fans believed they had played on the album. It was really kind of a raw deal that Ozzy gave to the actual players. Also, the fact that Aldridge and Sarzo toured with Ozzy on the Diary of a Madman tour certainly helped to further reinforce the erroneous belief that they had played on the record. Anyway, just wanted to get that straight. It's certainly not like Aldridge has tried to deceive anyone into thinking he originated the part, although he does play the crap out of it. And in fact, I saw him play the crap out of it on that Diary of a Madman tour. I watched a great video with Aldridge where he breaks it down. He plays it a little differently than Kerslake. Kerslake used a single bass kit and a couple of different toms. Aldridge plays it with double bass and a single floor tom, but it sounds amazing either way. As a kid who grew up in the late 70s and early 80s jamming in the garage with my buddies, I can tell you that Rock Candy by Montrose was a staple for guys like us. And I think this drum intro was a huge part of it. So heavy, so iconic, played by Denny Carmassi, in a band that was also Sammy Hagar's introduction to the rock world. According to bandleader Ronnie Montrose, this part came about one day when Carmassi was experimenting with variations on John Bonham's famous When the Levee Breaks drum intro. And you know, I can totally hear it. This is very Bonham-esque. It's that slow, heavy groove, that behind the beat feel, and the use of open space. You just find yourself waiting for that next hit. I think my favorite part is that little triplet on the bass drum. Bop, 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 bop. So cool.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so technically the drums aren't the first thing we hear on this one. We get a little bit of canned crowd noise and then Paul McCartney's energetic count in. But I think you guys can cut me some slack. Got to get Ringo in on the list. He comes in here with a nice 4-bar pattern. Some have credited this drum beat as foreshadowing hip-hop beats, and in fact, the Beastie Boys sampled this one on their Paul's Boutique album. I've always felt Ringo's drums sounded way better than most of his contemporaries. These drums have such a crisp, exhilarating feel, heavily compressed, and engineer Jeff Emmerich contributed by placing the microphones really close to the drum heads. That wasn't really done much at all in 1967. It's a very straightforward kick, snare pattern, but that very swishy open hi-hat Ringo adds in is just perfection. This is one of those rare cases where the drumming in the intro of a song somehow manages to capture the mood of the song's lyrics, but I think Larry Mullen Jr. manages to pull it off here for you too. Sunday Bloody Sunday is about a horrific shooting that took place in Northern Ireland in 1972. Protesters were killed, and Mullen gives us a very aggressive, military marching band style beat. These drums were recorded at the bottom of a stairwell to give a massive natural reverb. That's a little foreshadowing of something to come in the next few minutes. I know some of you already know what I'm talking about. This part is, I think, simpler than it may sound. It starts with a pickup on the and of 4, so right away we feel a little bit disoriented and off balance. But it's just steady 16th notes, single stroke rolls, right, left, right, left, right, left, primarily on the hi-hat, but then he just breaks away and goes to the snare from time to time without interrupting that flow. Meanwhile, the kick drum is just doing a steady 4 on the floor. Earlier I'd said that Over the Mountain was the shortest of the drum intros I would cover, but this one is actually right there with it. A 2-measure pattern played, of course, by longtime Aerosmith drummer Joey Kramer. The defining characteristics of this one, well, more than any other here, I think it's got a decidedly funk feel. We've got straight 8th notes on the hi-hat, but the key here is he opens the hi-hat on the very first hit and then quickly closes it for the rest. So if you isolate the hi-hat, you get the bass drum is mostly playing quarter notes, but there's that great pair of 16ths on the of 2 and the 3. 1E and a 2E and a 3 and 4. 1E and a 2E and a 3 and 4. That's what really gives this its drive, I think. Meanwhile, the snare drum is just a conventional backbeat on 2 and 4. By the way, like Ringo's part earlier, this is another one that was picked up on by the hip-hop community You had the massive Aerosmith Run DMC collaboration in 1986 with Walk This Way, one of the first times rock and hip hop had been crossed. So at the start of the video, I mentioned that these drum intros would be presented in alphabetical order, but I think it's only fitting that this one ended up last. Perhaps it's the greatest. Many people would say so. I believe Rick Beato put it at number 1 when he did a video on this subject. Certainly the most sampled drum beat of all time, and still basically the industry standard when you're talking about heavy, powerful drum beats. So the question is, how did they make Bonham's drums sound so massive? Well, I think there are several factors. First of all, they placed the drum kit at the bottom of a 3-story stairwell in Headley Grange in England where they recorded this. And Jimmy Page placed microphones up above on the landings. That certainly must have created a great natural reverb. But that echo wasn't all natural. Page also used something called a Binson Echo Rec, which was a delay unit from Italy that first came out in the 1950s and has also been used by people like Hank Marvin in the Shadows and David Gilmour of Pink Floyd. Then there's the fact that Bonham tended to use a very large bass drum, 24 inches, which is bigger than average. And finally, I think it's just the way Bonham played. There was something about the way he hit that just came across as heavier than everyone else. The part itself is pretty straightforward. You've got straight eighth notes on the hi-hat. I think the key here is the subtle thing Bonham does with the bass drum and the snare. Now, for the longest time, I thought the part was basically just boom, dat, boom, ba-ba, dat. Okay, but listen really closely. On that first hit on the downbeat, what you actually hear are 2 hits on the bass drum. The second one is much quieter, ba-ba. Then on beat 2, you're hearing 2 snare hits, da-da. It's very subtle, ba-da, da-da, bum, ba-ba, da-da. And the funny thing is, I always assumed those second hits that I was hearing were the echo. I knew the way this thing was recorded. It sounds massive. It sounds cavernous. I figured that was just an echo, but no, it's actually Bonham hitting twice, and he's got the control to go much quieter the second time. That's the great thing about Bonham. You know, I was just saying how he seems to hit harder than anyone else, but at the same time, he can give you this light touch at a moment's notice. So that's what I got for now. Please leave your favorites in the comments. If your favorite didn't appear in this video, there's a good chance it might be in the next one. I think I'm going to do at least another one of these because there are so many that really hurt to leave out of this video. All right, thanks for hanging out to the end, and we'll see you soon.